The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of Kensington Palace as William stood quietly in his study, hands clasped behind his back. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on his shoulders. Today would be different from any other day in their 23 years together. Today there would be no cameras capturing their usual warm exchanges. No public appearances where Kate's radiant smile would light up the room beside him. Kate moved through their private quarters with the same grace she had always possessed. But there was something different in her movements. Each step seemed measured, deliberate, as if she were memorizing the feel of the Persian rugs beneath her feet, the way the morning light danced across the family portraits lining the hallway. She paused at their bedroom door, her hand resting gently on the ornate handle, taking one last look at the space where they had shared countless quiet moments away from the public eye. The children had already been told. George, Charlotte, and Louis had accepted the news with the remarkable resilience that children often display, though Kate noticed how George's eyes lingered on his parents a little longer during breakfast. Charlotte had quietly slipped her small hand into her mother's during their usual morning walk through the palace gardens, while Louis had insisted on an extra bedtime story the night before, sensing somehow that change was coming. William found himself standing in the corridor outside the breakfast room, listening to the familiar sounds of his family's morning routine. Kate's gentle laughter as she helped Louis with his cereal, Charlotte's excited chatter about her upcoming school project, George's thoughtful questions about everything and nothing. These sounds had been the soundtrack of his life for so long that the thought of mornings without them felt impossible to comprehend. The decision had not come suddenly. It had been building quietly between them over months of careful consideration. Late-night conversations held in whispered tones, and painful moments of honesty about what their future could realistically hold. They had tried everything: counseling sessions held in complete secrecy, weekend retreats away from palace life, even simple date nights disguised as official functions. But sometimes love alone is not enough to bridge the growing distance between two people whose lives have evolved in different directions. Kate had been the first to voice what they both knew. During a quiet evening in their private sitting room, with the children safely asleep upstairs, she had looked across at William and said the words that had been hanging unspoken between them for months. "We're not the same people we were when we started this journey." Her voice had been steady, but William could see the tears she was holding back. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we need to give each other permission to become who we're meant to be now. The palace staff noticed nothing different that morning. William and Kate moved through their usual routines, with the same professionalism they had always displayed. But those who knew them well, their closest protection officers, their personal assistants who had been with them for years, sensed an undercurrent of finality in their interactions. The way William's hand lingered a moment longer when he passed Kate her morning tea. The way Kate's fingers traced the spine of a book William had given her years ago, before placing it carefully in a box. As the morning progressed, they found themselves in the palace gardens, walking the path they had strolled countless times before. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air with memories of happier times. Kate stopped beside the bench where William had proposed all those years ago, her fingers trailing along the weathered wood. "Do you remember what you said to me here?" she asked softly. William nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I promised you a lifetime of adventure." He managed a sad smile. "I suppose this is just a different kind of adventure than we imagined." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the gardeners tend to the flower beds, listening to the distant sounds of London beyond the palace walls. In a few hours they would face the world with an announcement that would shock millions. But for now, in this quiet moment, they were simply William and Kate, two people who had loved deeply, raised beautiful children together, and were now finding the courage to let each other go. The irony was not lost on either of them. They had spent years learning how to be public figures, how to present a united front to the world, how to balance their private emotions with their public duties. Now they would need to call upon all of those skills one final time, to show the world that even endings could be handled with dignity and grace. As they prepared to return to the palace, Kate reached for William's hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally, just as they had thousands of times before during public appearances and private moments alike. But this time, They both knew it would be among the last times they would share this simple gesture as husband and wife. The warmth of that connection, built over more than 2 decades together, would have to sustain them through what came next. George had always been the most perceptive of the 3 children. At 15, he possessed an intuitive understanding of the complexities that surrounded royal life, having grown up watching his parents navigate the delicate balance between duty and personal happiness. When his parents sat the children down in the family's private sitting room, George's mature eyes reflected a wisdom beyond his years. Charlotte, now 13, sat curled in her favorite armchair, her legs tucked beneath her. She had inherited her mother's emotional intelligence and had been sensing the subtle shifts in household energy for weeks. The way conversations would pause when she entered a room, the increase in serious phone calls behind closed doors, the careful scheduling that kept both parents busy but rarely together. She hadn't asked questions, but she had been preparing herself for news that would change everything. 10-year-old Louis was the one who broke the careful silence his parents had constructed around their announcement. "Are you getting divorced like Uncle Harry and Aunt Megan did?" he asked with the directness that only children possess. His question hung in the air, cutting through all the carefully prepared words his parents had rehearsed. Kate felt her composure waver for just a moment before she found her voice. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy and I have decided that we'll be happier living separately, but nothing about how much we love you 3 will ever change." Her voice remained steady, but William noticed how her hands trembled slightly as she reached out to touch Louis's cheek. William cleared his throat, leaning forward to make eye contact with each child. "Your mother and I have grown into different people over the years. Sometimes that happens. Even when 2 people care very much about each other, we want to show you that it's possible to handle difficult situations with kindness and respect." George nodded slowly, processing the information with the gravity of someone who understood the public implications of their parents' decision. "What will happen to our family traditions? Christmas at Sandringham? Summer holidays together?" His questions revealed the practical concerns of a teenager who was already thinking about how this change would affect the rhythms of their lives. Charlotte surprised them all by asking, "Will you still be friends? I mean, really friends, not just pretending for the cameras?" Her question struck at the heart of what made this separation different from the bitter divorces that had marked previous royal generations. Kate and William exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "We're going to try very hard to remain friends," Kate answered honestly. "We both want what's best for you 3, and we both want to support each other as we figure out this new chapter. It won't always be easy, but we're committed to handling this differently than others have in the past." Louis crawled from his chair onto the sofa between his parents, a gesture that felt both natural and heartbreaking. "Will we still have movie nights?" he asked, his voice smaller now as the reality of change began to settle in. William wrapped his arm around his youngest son. "We'll have different kinds of movie nights, maybe sometimes with Mummy at her new home, and sometimes with me here, but we'll make sure there are still plenty of movie nights." The conversation continued for over an hour, with the children asking questions that ranged from practical matters about living arrangements to deeper concerns about whether their parents' love for them would somehow be diminished by this change. Through it all, William and Kate maintained the united front they had perfected over years of public appearances, but now it served a more important purpose than satisfying media expectations. George eventually stood up and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. "I think I understand," he said quietly. "You're choosing to end things while you still care about each other, instead of waiting until you don't." His insight left his parents momentarily speechless, impressed by their eldest son's emotional maturity. Charlotte joined her brother at the window. "It's actually kind of brave," she observed. "Everyone expects royal marriages to last forever, no matter what. You're saying that sometimes the brave thing is knowing when to let go." As the afternoon wore on, the children began to open up about things they had noticed and worried about in recent months. Charlotte admitted she had been concerned about the way her parents seemed to be working around each other, rather than with each other. George confessed that he had overheard hushed phone conversations and had been worried that one of them was ill. Louis, with the honesty of childhood, said he had been sad that family dinners had become less frequent and more formal. Their responses helped William and Kate understand that their children had been living with uncertainty for longer than they had realized. In some ways, the announcement brought relief to questions the children had been afraid to ask. As evening approached, the family found themselves in an impromptu group hug that lasted longer than usual. There was something different about this embrace. It felt both like an ending and a beginning. They were no longer a traditional nuclear family, but they were still a family bound by love, respect, and shared history. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, William and Kate sat together reviewing the arrangements they had made for custody and shared responsibilities. They had worked with child psychologists and family counselors to ensure that their children's well-being remained the priority throughout the transition. The children's reactions had been both better and more complex than they had hoped. Their maturity was impressive, but it also highlighted how much these young people had already had to navigate in their unusual lives. Now they would be asked to handle one more challenge with grace and resilience. The palace corridors had witnessed centuries of royal drama, but the events unfolding behind closed doors that week carried a different energy than the scandals and crises of the past. Staff members who had served the royal family for decades found themselves navigating uncharted territory as William and Kate prepared for their public announcement. Sarah, Kate's longtime personal assistant, noticed the change first. For months, she had been managing two increasingly separate schedules, coordinating events that seemed designed to keep the couple apart rather than together. The synchronized calendars that had once been a hallmark of their partnership had gradually evolved into careful choreography that minimized their joint appearances. In the communications office, Private Secretary James Morrison was working around the clock with a small, trusted team to craft the statement that would soon shock the world. Unlike previous royal separations that had been marked by leaked stories and palace intrigue, this announcement was being handled with unprecedented care and mutual respect. Every word was being scrutinized not just for its impact on public perception, but for its effect on three children who would read these words about their parents. The Queen's former communications director had been brought in as a consultant, lending his expertise to ensure that the announcement would be received with the dignity that William and Kate hoped to maintain throughout their separation. "This isn't about blame or failure," he advised during one of many strategy sessions. "This is about two people who are choosing to prioritize their family's well-being over public expectations." Meanwhile, in the palace kitchens, the staff had noticed subtle changes in meal requests. Formal dinners for two had become rare, replaced by casual family meals or individual trays sent to separate studies. Mrs. Henderson, who had been preparing meals for the family for 8 years, found herself fighting back tears as she realized she might never again prepare the intimate anniversary dinners that had been a quiet tradition. The security team faced their own challenges as they developed new protocols for what would soon become two separate households. Protection officers who had spent years coordinating movements for the couple now found themselves planning for a future where William and Kate would need separate details for separate lives. The logistics were complex, but the emotional adjustment was harder. These men and women had protected not just two individuals, but a partnership that had seemed unshakable. In Kate's dressing room, longtime dresser and confidant Mary was quietly helping to sort through years of accumulated belongings. Gowns that had made headlines at state dinners were being carefully cataloged and packed. Personal items that had found their way into shared spaces over more than 2 decades of life together were being gently separated. The process was methodical and respectful, but each item told a story of the life they had built together. William's private office had become a hub of activity as his staff worked to restructure his official duties. Events that had been planned months in advance with the assumption of Kate's participation were being quietly reorganized. The delicate task of explaining these changes to other royal family members fell to his private secretary, who handled each conversation with diplomatic care. The household staff had been briefed about the impending announcement, but sworn to absolute secrecy. Many of these individuals had worked for the family since before the children were born. They had witnessed first steps, birthday parties, quiet family moments that never made the newspapers. Now they were being asked to maintain their professionalism while processing their own emotions about the end of an era. Groundskeeper Thomas, who had tended the palace gardens for 15 years, found himself thinking about all the family photos that had been taken among his carefully maintained roses. He remembered Kate's joy when she discovered that one of the rose bushes had been planted the year she and William were married. Now he wondered if those flowers would take on a different meaning, symbols of beauty that bloomed and faded in natural cycles. The children's nanny, who had been with the family for 7 years, was perhaps facing the most complex adjustment of all. Her role would continue, but the dynamics would change dramatically. She had become skilled at reading the subtle communications between William and Kate, understanding their parenting preferences and supporting their united approach. Now she would need to adapt to coordinating between two households while maintaining stability for the children. In the palace library, family historian Dr. Matthews was quietly researching precedents for how royal separations had been handled in the past. His research painted a grim picture of acrimonious divorces, public scandals, and bitter custody battles that had played out in the tabloids. William and Kate's approach represented a complete departure from historical patterns, and Dr. Matthews found himself hoping that their example might set a new standard for how such transitions could be managed. The florist, who had provided arrangements for countless palace events, received an unusual request that week. Instead of the formal centerpieces typically ordered for official functions, Kate had asked for simple bouquets to be placed throughout the family's private quarters. Something peaceful, she had specified. Something that feels like new beginnings rather than endings. As the day of the announcement approached, the palace staff found themselves united in their respect for how William and Kate were handling an impossible situation. These individuals, who had seen the family at their most vulnerable moments, understood better than anyone the genuine care and consideration being put into every decision. The evening before the announcement, William and Kate hosted a small dinner for their closest staff members. It was an unusual gesture, but one that reflected their understanding of how this change would affect the extended family of people who had supported them throughout their marriage. The conversation was warm, but tinged with sadness, acknowledgement of the end of a chapter that had defined all their lives for more than 2 decades. The morning of the announcement dawned gray and drizzly, as if London itself was preparing for the somber news that would soon ripple across the globe. William stood in his private study reviewing the statement one final time. Every word had been carefully chosen, crafted to convey respect, gratitude, and hope even in the midst of profound change. Kate was in her sitting room, taking a few moments of quiet reflection before the storm of media attention that would inevitably follow. She had changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a simple navy dress that conveyed both professionalism and accessibility. Today was not about fashion, statements, or royal protocol. It was about 2 human beings sharing their truth with honesty and dignity. The statement was scheduled to be released simultaneously across all royal communication channels at precisely 2 p.m. In the hours leading up to that moment, a small army of communications professionals worked to ensure that every detail was perfectly coordinated. This was not just a press release. It was a carefully orchestrated message that would need to reach everyone from world leaders to school children who had grown up seeing William and Kate as the embodiment of modern royal romance. At 1:45 p.m., William and Kate met in the blue drawing room, the same elegant space where they had posed for countless official photographs over the years. They stood together by the window, looking out at the reporters who had begun gathering outside the palace gates. Neither spoke, but their shared silence held the weight of everything they had experienced together. The statement, when it was finally released, was unlike anything the royal family had ever issued before. It read with a warmth and authenticity that immediately distinguished it from the formal language typically associated with palace communications. The opening lines set the tone. After much thoughtful consideration and with deep respect for each other and our family, we have decided to end our marriage. The statement continued with words that would be quoted in newspapers around the world. Our 23 years together have been filled with joy, growth, and the incredible privilege of raising 3 remarkable children. We have grown as individuals in ways that have led us to different paths, and we believe the most loving thing we can do for our family is to acknowledge this truth with honesty and courage. What made the statement remarkable was its complete absence of the typical language of blame or irreconcilable differences. Instead, it spoke of evolution, mutual respect, and conscious choice. We remain committed to supporting each other as co-parents and as individuals pursuing our separate futures. Our children's well-being will always be our highest priority, and we are confident that this decision, while difficult, will ultimately strengthen our family bonds. The statement addressed the public's natural curiosity while maintaining appropriate boundaries. We ask for privacy during this transition, not because we are ashamed of our decision, but because we want to focus our energy on our children and on handling this change with the grace and dignity that our roles require. Within minutes of the statement's release, news alerts were pinging on phones across the globe. Social media erupted with a mixture of shock, sadness, and surprising support for the couple's approach. The hashtag #RoyalRespect began trending as people expressed admiration for the thoughtful way William and Kate were handling their separation. Television news programs interrupted regular programming to share the breaking news. Royal correspondents, many of whom had covered William and Kate's relationship since their university days, found themselves emotional as they reported on the end of a love story that had captivated the world. "This is not the bitter divorce we've seen in previous royal generations," observed one veteran reporter. "This feels like two people who still genuinely care about each other making an incredibly difficult decision." The reaction from other royal family members had been coordinated in advance. King Charles released a brief statement expressing his support and love for both William and Kate, emphasizing that they would remain beloved members of the royal family regardless of their marital status. Prince Harry and Meghan, speaking from their home in California, shared their own message of support, noting the courage it takes to prioritize family well-being over public expectations. International leaders began issuing their own statements throughout the afternoon. The Prime Minister spoke about the dignity with which William and Kate were handling their separation, while presidents and prime ministers from Commonwealth nations expressed their continued respect and support for both individuals. What surprised many observers was the overwhelmingly positive public response. Instead of the scandal and speculation that had surrounded previous royal separations, people seemed genuinely moved by the couple's approach. Social media was filled with messages of support, with many people sharing their own stories of amicable divorces and successful co-parenting relationships. By evening, the palace had received thousands of messages from around the world. Many were from families who had gone through their own separations and wanted to express appreciation for the example William and Kate were setting. Children wrote letters expressing their hope that the family would still be happy, even if it looked different than before. The international media response was equally unprecedented. Rather than sensational headlines about royal failure, newspapers led with stories about mature decision-making and modern approaches to family transition. "A new model for royal separation," read one headline. "Grace under pressure," declared another. As the day ended, William and Kate found themselves cautiously optimistic about the public response. The statement they had agonized over for weeks had been received exactly as they had hoped, with understanding, respect, and recognition of the courage required to handle such a personal decision in the public eye. That evening, they sat with their children to watch some of the news coverage together. It was important to them that George, Charlotte, and Louis see how their family's story was being told to the world, and they were proud that the narrative focused on love, respect, and positive change rather than failure or scandal. The statement had accomplished exactly what they had hoped. It had shared their truth with honesty and dignity, setting the tone for everything that would follow in their new chapter as a family reimagined. Within hours of the announcement, the world seemed to pause and take a collective breath. From the bustling streets of New York to quiet villages in rural England, people found themselves stopping their daily routines to process the news that had just shattered one of the most enduring royal love stories of modern times. In London, crowds began gathering outside Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, despite the gentle rain that had been falling since morning. Unlike the angry mobs that had surrounded royal residences during previous scandals, these gatherings felt more like quiet vigils. People brought flowers not in mourning, but as gestures of support and gratitude for more than 2 decades of dedicated service. Handwritten notes appeared tied to the palace railings, many expressing admiration for the courage William and Kate had shown in their approach to this deeply personal decision. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented activity as millions of people around the World shared their reactions. The response was remarkably different from the cynical commentary that typically followed royal news. Instead, people shared stories of their own family transitions, expressing appreciation for seeing public figures handle divorce with such obvious care and mutual respect. "Thank you, William," and "Thank you, Kate" began trending alongside our royal respect, as people found ways to express their gratitude. For the example, the couple was setting television news programs around the world cleared their schedules to provide comprehensive coverage of the announcement and its implications. Royal experts who had spent years analyzing every gesture and glance between William and Kate found themselves in the unusual position of having nothing negative to report. Instead, they focused on the unprecedented nature of the couple's approach and what it might mean for the future of the monarchy. Dr. Margaret Thornton, a family psychologist who had been following royal dynamics for decades, appeared on multiple news programs throughout the day. "What we're witnessing is revolutionary," she explained to viewers. "This is not a failure of marriage. This is a success of mature decision-making. William and Kate are showing us that sometimes the most loving thing two people can do is acknowledge when they've grown apart and choose to handle that reality with grace." The international response was equally remarkable. In France, newspaper headlines praised the couple's elegance in adversity. German media focused on the modern approach to family restructuring that William and Kate were demonstrating. Australian television programs featured segments about how the announcement was being received in Commonwealth nations, with many expressing continued support for both individuals in their separate futures. Religious leaders from various denominations issued thoughtful statements throughout the day. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who had officiated at William and Kate's wedding, released a message emphasizing the importance of supporting families through all types of transitions. "Love takes many forms," this statement read, "and sometimes the deepest love is expressed through the courage to make difficult decisions for the well-being of children and family, child development." Experts weighed in on the potential positive impact of seeing public figures handle divorce with such obvious consideration for their children's needs. Dr. Sarah Williams, a leading researcher in family transitions, noted in interviews that William and Kate's approach could help normalize healthy co-parenting relationships. For countless families worldwide, the response from celebrities and public figures was swift and supportive. Actors, musicians, and other members of the public eye shared messages of respect and encouragement. Many chose to share their own experiences with divorce and successful co-parenting, creating an unexpected moment of vulnerability and connection across social media platforms. Perhaps most touching were the responses from children around the world. Schools reported students asking thoughtful questions about family structures and expressing concern for George, Charlotte, and Louis. Teachers found themselves having unexpected conversations about different types of families and how love can continue even when marriages end. Art teachers shared drawings created by students showing the royal family in their new configuration, with hearts and rainbows symbolizing continued love and hope. The economic response was equally unprecedented. Rather than the typical market uncertainty that followed royal scandals, financial markets remained stable. Brand analysts noted that both William and Kate's individual brands seemed to be strengthened rather than damaged by their thoughtful approach to separation. Companies that had partnerships with either of them issued statements of continued support and confidence. International women's organizations praised Kate's role in modeling how women could maintain dignity and strength during major life transitions. Young women's groups organized discussions about the pressures faced by public figures and the courage required to make authentic choices despite external expectations. Mental health organizations saw an opportunity to highlight the importance of emotional well-being and the courage required to make difficult decisions that prioritize psychological health. The announcement sparked conversations about the stigma surrounding divorce and the importance of supporting individuals and families through major transitions. By the end of the week, opinion polls showed remarkable results. Rather than decreased support for the royal family, approval ratings had actually increased. People expressed admiration for the transparency and maturity William and Kate had demonstrated. More importantly, the conversation had shifted from gossip and speculation to genuine discussions about modern family structures, healthy relationships, and the evolution of love over time. Letters poured into the palace from around the world. Teachers wrote about using the announcement as a teaching moment about respect and kindness. Therapists shared how they were using William and Kate's example to help clients navigate their own relationship challenges. Parents expressed gratitude for having such a positive example to share with their children about how adults can handle disagreement and change. The global response had exceeded everyone's expectations. What could have been a scandal had become a moment of collective reflection about love, growth, and the courage required to make authentic choices in the face of public scrutiny. William and Kate had not just announced their separation. They had inadvertently started a worldwide conversation about what healthy relationships and healthy endings could look like in the modern world. 3 days after the announcement, Kate stood in the doorway of what had been their shared bedroom for the last time as William's wife. Her belongings had been carefully packed and moved to her new residence in a wing of Kensington Palace that would allow her to remain close to the children while giving the family space to adjust to their new dynamic. But this moment, this final goodbye to the room where they had shared so many quiet conversations, morning cups of tea and whispered discussions about their children's futures, felt heavier than she had anticipated. William found her there. As the late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows, he had been looking for her to discuss the logistics of Charlotte's upcoming school event, but seeing her silhouette against the familiar backdrop of their former life together made him pause. They had said their formal goodbyes already, had divided their possessions with careful consideration, had worked out custody arrangements with the help of counselors and lawyers, but somehow none of that had prepared them for these small, intimate moments of finality. "I keep thinking I've forgotten something," Kate said softly, not turning around. Her voice carried a mixture of sadness and something that might have been relief. 23 years of shared life, and I keep feeling like I'm leaving something important behind. William stepped into the room, his footsteps muffled by the Persian rug they had chosen together during their second year of marriage. "I've been thinking the same thing. But maybe what we're leaving behind isn't something we can pack in boxes." They stood together in the space that had been their sanctuary, looking at the empty dresser where Kate's jewelry box had sat, the bare nightstand where her stack of books had been a permanent fixture. The room looked larger somehow, as if their shared presence had been what made it feel warm and intimate. "Do you remember our first night here?" Kate asked, finally turning to face him. "You were so worried about whether I would be happy living in a palace. You kept asking if the rooms were too formal, too cold." William smiled at the memory. "You told me that any space could feel like home if it was filled with love and laughter. And you were right. This place has been filled with both for so many years." They moved to the window seat where they had spent countless evenings talking about their days, their hopes for the children, their concerns about balancing public duties with private life. Kate ran her fingers along the cushions where they had curled up together during late-night conversations about everything and nothing. "I need you to know something," William said, his voice careful and deliberate. "I need you to know that I don't regret any of it. Not the marriage, not the children, not the years we spent building this life together. Even knowing how it ends, I would choose it all again." Kate felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not the bitter tears of regret or anger. They were the complex tears of gratitude mixed with grief, of love that had evolved beyond romantic partnership, but remained genuine and deep. "I feel the same way. We created something beautiful together, even if it's not meant to last forever in the way we originally imagined." They talked for nearly an hour, sharing memories that would become even more precious now that they were officially part of their past, rather than their ongoing present. They laughed about the early days when they were still learning how to navigate royal protocol together, remembered the night each of their children was born, spoke about the moments of pure joy they had experienced as a family. As the sun began to set, painting the room in golden light, they found themselves sitting closer together than they had in months. There was something freeing about this final conversation, knowing that they no longer had to pretend that everything was fine, no longer had to work to recapture something that had naturally evolved into something different. "What happens now?" Kate asked, though she knew the practical answers. They had discussed co-parenting schedules, holiday arrangements, how they would handle public appearances where both their presences were required. "Now we figure out how to be the best versions of ourselves separately," William replied. And we learn how to be friends and co-parents without the pressure of trying to be husband and wife, when that no longer fits who we've become. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain about whether she was intruding on a private moment. "Mummy? Daddy? Louis is asking when we're having dinner, and George wants to know if we're still doing movie night tomorrow." The question highlighted the reality they would all be navigating in the weeks and months ahead. Family traditions would need to be reimagined, but the love and care that had created those traditions would continue in new forms. "Why don't we have dinner together tonight?" Kate suggested, looking at William for confirmation. "All 5 of us. We can talk about how movie nights might work going forward." William nodded, grateful for Kate's instinct to make this transition feel natural and positive for the children. "That sounds perfect." As they prepared to leave the room together for the last time as a married couple, Kate paused at the door. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for the years we had, for the children we raised together, and for handling this ending with such kindness." William reached out and took her hand briefly, a gesture that felt both familiar and final. "Thank you for showing me what it means to put family first, even when it requires letting go of what we thought our future would look like." They walked down the corridor together toward the sound of their children's voices, ready to begin the complex process of rebuilding their family in a new configuration. The goodbye had been said not with dramatic declarations or bitter arguments, but with quiet gratitude and mutual respect. It was an ending that honored what they had built together, while acknowledging that sometimes the most loving thing, too, people can do is give each other permission to grow beyond the boundaries of their shared life. Their silent goodbye had been witnessed only by the walls that had sheltered their marriage, but it was conducted with the same grace and dignity that would characterize everything that followed in their new chapter as a family reimagined. 6 months later, the world had settled into a new rhythm with the royal family's transformed dynamic. What had initially seemed like an ending had gradually revealed itself to be a different kind of beginning, one that challenged traditional expectations about what family success could look like. In the modern world, Kate stood in her new sitting room, reviewing the schedule for the children's upcoming school holidays. The space felt distinctly hers in a way that shared quarters never quite had. Books on conservation and child development lined the shelves. Photographs of her work with various charities covered one wall, and plants thrived in the abundant natural light. For the first time in over 2 decades, she was learning who she was as an individual, rather than as half of a partnership. Across the palace grounds, William was having a similar experience of rediscovering his individual identity. His study had been reorganized to reflect his personal interests and working style, without the need to accommodate another person's preferences. The walls displayed photographs from his conservation work, his pilot training, and his individual charitable endeavors, alongside the family photos that remained precious to him. The children had adapted to their new routine with the resilience that had impressed their parents from the beginning. Sunday dinners remained a family tradition, but now they rotated between Kate's residence and William's, with each parent contributing their own touches to these weekly gatherings. George had commented that he actually enjoyed having 2 different spaces to spend time with his parents, noting that each felt more relaxed and authentic than their previous attempts at family unity. Charlotte had perhaps benefited most from seeing her parents model healthy decision-making in the face of difficult circumstances. At 13, she was beginning to understand the pressures that came with royal life, and watching her parents prioritize emotional honesty over public expectations had given her a framework for thinking about her own future choices. Louis, now 11, had adjusted to the new arrangement with typical childhood adaptability. He enjoyed having 2 bedrooms, 2 sets of books and toys, and what he called double movie nights when special occasions called for all 5 family members to gather in one location. The public had not only accepted but embraced this new model of royal family life. Approval ratings for both William and Kate had reached all-time highs as people responded positively to their authenticity and maturity. Their separate charitable endeavors flourished as each was able to focus more intensively on causes that personally passionate them without the need to coordinate every decision with a spouse. Kate's work with early childhood development had expanded internationally, taking her to conferences and projects around the world where she could speak with the authority of both professional knowledge and personal experience. Her decision to prioritize emotional well-being in her own life had given new depth to her advocacy for children's mental health initiatives. William's conservation efforts had similarly expanded as he was able to dedicate more time and energy to environmental causes. His work with wildlife preservation had taken on new urgency and focus, and his public speaking on these issues carried an authenticity that came from being able to speak entirely from his own convictions. Their co-parenting relationship had become a model for divorced families around the world. They attended school events together, celebrated holidays as a family unit, and maintained the united front that had always characterized their parenting approach. The difference was that this unity now came from genuine cooperation rather than marital obligation. The moment that perhaps best illustrated their successful transition came during Charlotte's school play 6 months after their separation. Both William and Kate attended, sitting together in the front row as they had countless times before. But observers noted something different in their interaction. They seemed more relaxed with each other, more genuinely comfortable than they had appeared in years. After the performance, they walked out together with their children, chatting easily about Charlotte's performance and making plans for a celebration dinner. A photographer captured a candid moment of the 5 of them laughing together at something Louis had said, and the image became emblematic of their family's evolution. They look happier, people commented on social media, more relaxed, more like themselves. The transformation extended beyond their immediate family to influence how others approached their own relationship challenges. Divorce mediation services reported an increase in couples seeking amicable separations inspired by William and Kate's example. Family therapists noted more clients expressing interest in conscious uncoupling, approaches that prioritized mutual respect and children's well-being over traditional adversarial divorce proceedings. Their individual royal duties had also evolved in positive ways. Without the need to coordinate every appearance and decision with a spouse, both William and Kate were able to take on projects that aligned more closely with their personal interests and schedules. Their separate work styles, which had sometimes created friction in their marriage, now allowed each to excel in their chosen areas without compromise. The annual Christmas gathering at Sandringham had required some adjustment, but even this traditional family celebration had adapted to accommodate their new dynamic. William and Kate joined the broader royal family celebration with their children, maintaining the continuity of tradition while modeling how families could evolve without losing their essential connections. Looking back on that gray morning when they had announced their separation, both William and Kate felt a sense of quiet pride in how they had navigated one of life's most challenging transitions. They had faced intense public scrutiny, personal grief, and the complex logistics of restructuring a high-profile family, and they had done it all while maintaining their dignity, their friendship, and their commitment to their children's well-being. The tears that millions had shed upon hearing news of their separation had gradually transformed into admiration and respect for the grace with which they had handled an impossible situation. Their story had become one of courage, growth, and the evolution of love into something different but equally meaningful. As Kate looked out her window at the palace gardens where she and William had taken their last walk as a married couple, she felt not sadness but gratitude. They had created something beautiful together, and now they were creating something beautiful apart. Their silent goodbye had marked not just the end of a marriage, but the beginning of a new kind of family story, one that honored the past while embracing the possibility of growth, change, and different forms of love in the future. The world had watched them say goodbye to one version of their life together, and now it was watching them build something new and equally meaningful from the foundation of respect, shared history, and enduring care for the family they would always share, regardless of their marital status.